There was a typo in the agenda. You good? Deepmore, we're live.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next Beach Preservation Committee meeting. This is a special meeting that we called out of the order of our normal meetings, just because we had some urgent action items to take care of before the next city council meeting. I noticed that the public has been properly informed, so we can proceed. First agenda item, call to order. I'm calling the meeting to order at 9 o'clock sharp. Citizens' comments, second agenda point. We have no citizens' presence, no citizens' comments, therefore will be discussed. Third is new business. And the new business we wanted to discuss this morning is to apply the beach committee's new definition of what a healthy beach should look like, which we discussed in our last meeting, to the current situation in order to calculate whether or not it would be prudent for the city to even put more sand down than the maximum permit volume. That's what we wanted to discuss. And to that end, we prepared a little bit of a calculation package. And when I say we, Wendy prepared it, we reviewed it and studied it and made some adjustments. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague and Vice Chairman, Wendy, to lead us through the calculations, please.
Okay. Where do you want to start, guys? Because most of this is what we've already talked about before in terms of the healthy beach goals and definition. Do you want to go over it again so we're all aligned, or do you want to jump to the calculations?
I mean, it'll take a short time just to read the definition again, but yeah. I think
Okay.
we all know, but
All right, we're going to start
for
with
the
page.
record.
Let's do it briefly for the record
Start with page one.
and to freshen us up.
Okay, so what we would be proposing to the city council is the first is to adopt the new healthy beach definition. So that definition is 200 feet of sand at the highest tide measured from the 2018 baseline, or where the houses are on the wrong side of the baseline, if you will, then we would take that structure, a pool or a house, whichever is most seaward. And in terms of the advanced fill, we're using the most recent 5-year erosion rate, which is different than the rate that CSC has been using, which is all the way back to 2010, which we feel is not relevant to what we see going on at the ends of the island. Even if they don't change the volumes, I would recommend that at a minimum, they do number one, which is to adopt the new way that we would be looking at a healthy beach. The second is we applied the healthy beach definition using Stevens' calculations, and it results in the total project volume to be 3 million cubic yards of sand. That is 546,000 more than what that permit max is. All right, so that's an extra 4 million that the city would have to consider. I know we're in a money tight world right now, but we also spent 4 million on emergency measures. So it's just understanding the risks and what we feel comfortable with as a city. So those are the top two recommendations. The next page is healthy beach goals, just talking about where we're at today and where we're trying to go. So the current method measures from a structure line. So it's all about going all the way up to the house, but then trying to protect the house. The problem is that it leads to a beachless shore. So if you look at what the cubic yard calculation from the structure says, is that we only have about 16,000 deficit on the south end. Here are pictures of what the south end looked like this weekend. This is from Alice.
It was
Thank you,
at
Alice.
sunset, so it was high tide.
High tide, but at sunset, so it's a little dark. So that's an area where there's sandbags.
For the record, there's zero beach.
There's zero.
Obviously the water's coming up to the sandbags. In the Wild Dunes area, Beechwood East, the water's going under the homes. Exciting that it didn't go to the street, but it's obviously well under the homes. This is a picture of 510 looking north. This is 510 Ocean looking north. They probably have about 5 feet of beach. This was
Dry
taken
beach,
during
yeah.
the day. So you can see where where the high tide water line was. The dunes are insufficient, so if you actually put the dune back, you would be eroding the beach. This was at a 6.3 foot tide. It was at night, so we usually don't have much winds at night, but I wasn't here, I was in Texas, I don't know. But we're having erosion. I know that it's not all the way up to the structure, which is the definition that's being used. But in terms of if you want to try and support tourism, you don't want people sandbagging, that's where we're at. This is at 510 Ocean looking the other way. You want to pass that around. Here's a picture at 6th Avenue looking north. There's like a big ridge that's cutting in, and it goes all the way to the pier.
What's this next one again?
So that's
6th Avenue.
6th Avenue looking
Oh,
north.
6th
You can
Avenue
see
looking
the
north,
ridge of water that's coming in.
So
And
this
it's
is where you
getting,
have maybe 20, 25 feet?
yep, probably.
Yeah, I measured when I walked out that day, and it was 6'2", it was, about 24, 20,
Now, if you put the
24.
dune back, then, if you put the dune back, you gotta, maybe you have,
Right, right.
maybe you have 5 feet of beach, 20 minus 15, maybe
Right,
you're
there's
15 feet
almost no
short of a dune.
there, yeah.
Alice, what were you, so you were measuring between the
I-
base of the
I went out.
current
high tide,
dune?
And I measured from the base of the dune to wherever the water was. And so when I got to, I was heading south from, I walk on 5th, and I headed south. So I measured at 5th, and then I went south, and when I got to the sandbagged area, the 2 sandbagged houses on either side of Ron Ready's house, which is what you're looking at with the flagpole. This one here,
Yeah,
that one.
That's Teresa's house, if you know Teresa.
So there was about maybe 8 feet between the sandbag and the high tide line, because that's the setback kind of from his wall back to those sandbags for those other 2 properties. But at that point, I couldn't walk past because the water was already lapping up against his wall. So that was the high tide time. And then when I couldn't get around it, and it got too dark to get a picture of the Breach Inlet side, those homes that are closer to the bridge. And so I went back the next morning and saw that the dune had a slope, but there was this cut where
Kind of a
the
gully.
water had come up
Yeah.
and took off about a foot, maybe of that little slope. So it
So I
was all
think
the way
this,
up to the dune.
this is
This
good
is the
enough.
windjammer. It goes
Yeah.
all the way up to the pier. This thing is coming all the way up to the windjammer. So I guess I feel like there's 1.8 miles maybe of problem on the south end, not 1,000 feet, based on the definition that we would be using, which is to try and preserve properties. So that was that whole beachless shore. That's the visual that goes with our words to the beachless shore. The problem is that it's eroding property value. It's going to affect our flood insurance. It fails under extreme pressure. We have 12 more of those high tides coming, and then what if we have
And that was
a,
just 6.2.
right.
That's not an 8 tide.
What do we do if we have winds and a high tide? What if we have a hurricane coming through? And again,
Or when?
pardon me, or when,
Or
when it's coming.
Yeah.
And, we're spending $4 million on emergency measures now. We're hoping to get out of emergency mode and into a proactive mode. So we're trying to protect a tourist beach, an entire beach, as well as the property line then. So the risk of tourism hopefully is much lower as we have attractive beaches to support that tourism and short-term rentals that we need on our island. Risk of property values goes down. We're trying to protect 6.5 billion of property values. Stephen has said that once you lose property value on an oceanfront, it affects everybody in rows 2, 3, 4, et cetera. It affects the whole island. We're trying to minimize structure damage. We're trying to protect homes and pools and land, and we're trying to reduce emergency spending. So that's the why of what we're doing. We talked about the healthy beach already. We're talking about it from measuring it from the baseline for the majority of the island or a structure line on the far north end in Wild Dunes. 200 feet from the mean highest high water line. So there's 2 different tides in a day, so you would take the higher of those 2. If you look over time, that's like a 5.5 foot tide is kind of average what that mean is. So if you have 200 feet at a 5.5 tide, yeah, you're going to have days when there's winds and it blows, 8 feet. But you've got 200 feet, so hopefully you make it through and you don't have dune destruction, property loss, sandbagging, et cetera. Okay, in terms of where you would put the sand, you either put it where there's a current deficit today or where you project that there's going to be a deficit at the end of the year project life. And then we also put a trigger in that says you would need to be experiencing erosion in order to meet the criteria of doing a renourishment. Any questions on that?
No, that's
Again, this is-
pretty much what we agreed on last
This is,
meeting.
this is based on the way Hilton Head does it, it's based on the way Dare County does it. Dare County said that they had 200 feet of beach and they did it okay when a hurricane came through. So they were everyone was trying to model off of that one area that had survived a hurricane and did well. Okay, so in terms of the renourishment volume calculations, it would basically be your current deficit plus your advanced fill. We're recommending the erosion rate being based on the last 5 years of erosion, not a 20-year erosion rate. And then you would back out theoretically any excess. So if you have 300 feet of beach now, but you expect it to erode, that's 100 extra feet of excess beach. So you wouldn't take that full 8-year erosion, you would subtract out the excess. We don't have those calculations, but that would be theoretically, if you did, that's how you would do it. Any questions on that?
Now let's come to the calculations.
Okay. So what we're recommending for the volume is, at a minimum, we would recommend the permit max, and that is for each of the 3 areas. You've got the area around Beechwood East, you've got the area at the far end, and then you've got the 2 reaches at the south end. And we would recommend, at a minimum, the max for each of those individual 3 permitted areas. If you take the cubic yards that Stephen calculated for us using the new definition of a healthy beach, that comes to an extra 546,000 cubic yards. So on the south end, that's an extra 352,000 cubic yards. That would cost 2.6 million extra. That is from a combination of both the larger deficit using the new definition of a healthy beach, and we've changed the 5-year erosion rate using it through February of 2025. So that's a little bit of the Army Corps sand in it, but not a lot. Most of that came later in 2025. So that erosion rate is 89,000 cubic yards per year. On the north end, the difference is 194,000 cubic yards. That would cost an extra 1.5 million. It's from the larger deficit using the new definition, and we're using the same advanced fill numbers that CSE has used in the calculation. 2 other recommendations that we would make is to smooth out or extend the Beechwood East area renourishment to 53rd Avenue to create a usable beach. Right now, you've got this bubble of where they're putting the sand, and then there's no sand, and then it kind of extends back out again because there's been erosion. So just smooth it out so it doesn't look weird and creates a usable beach. And the other
So Wendy,
recommendation.
there is no correlation between the healthy beach and where you're recommending to place the sand.
No.
So
It's, the
Two
deficits
totally-
are the same. So like, for example, at Beechwood East, it's right next to the Grand Pavilion. If you look at the Grand Pavilion, they're over 200 feet from the line. So they would actually be a little bit in excess, but you see that there's erosion coming. So they would still meet the definition. And then if you go south of that towards 53rd, they've got like 400 feet. Maybe not 400 feet, but a ton of bushes from the baseline.
Right.
So they wouldn't meet the definition, but
we would place sand there anyway.
I would just smooth it out. So there's like a picture.
Yeah, and I do know that the plan pictures are, you know, they're overlaying stitched together aerials, and it's very hard to see. I do get that on the plan page, there's weird stuff going on at the end, yeah.
Yeah, that one, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've had a bit of erosion because I think it's where the shoal attached, and so they did see some,
yeah.
because that's south of where the shoal attachment is, so you did see some recent erosion there. There's plenty from the baseline, but it goes up to the permit line, if you see the line that Stephen's drawn for where the edge of that renourishment would go. And at least it creates a beach so people can, if they're renting there, can have a place to put their chairs. And I think it would naturally smooth out over time, so you could argue, why would I do that?
That was kind of my question.
Right. But it just looks weird to me, and it would at least create a usable beach. So it doesn't have to be 200 feet there, but I would at least smooth it out so that people can put their chair down.
Was that the picture that John brought out? Was that one?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
John's famous picture.
Wendy, I
We
know
got
we
you
have it
covered.
in the appendix, but can you, for Doug's benefit, talk to the pages that show the deficit?
Yeah.
And then show the erosion rate and how we calculated the amount of sand that's needed.
Okay, so. Do you want to go through this mess?
Yeah,
Okay. I have no idea where this is in the document, because I don't know how to add page numbers to my online iPad PowerPoint.
it is
Go to the Excel.
page 12. Right, that's what you,
I don't know.
page 12. Page 12 in the document.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Okay, so at the very top, these are the different cases that Stephen Trainum did for us. So on the left is using the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services baseline. So those are the island deficits by reach in that column. The next line over is the structure line. That's how we've traditionally measured things, where you just go up to the house. We would change that to house and pool in the future. But this was based on his old line of houses. And then the third case is a management line. We said, please calculate what the deficit would be if you measured from the dune everywhere. And the dune could be, you've been accreting, you've got a bunch of bushes. And so measure at the end of that bush, or where the dune is, and give us 200 feet of beach there. So you can see that third case is an extreme amount of volume, 2.7 million cubic yards of sand. So we said, okay, we're not going to be looking at that one. So we said, okay, this baseline makes sense for the majority of the island, but there are some areas in wild dunes where it really should be the structure line that is used, not the baseline, because the houses are on the other side of the baseline. So we took the higher of those two cases. So that's what the far right column is. It's
Far right
saying-
column is it's a high amount of either the SCDES baseline or the structure line.
So,
So in one case, reach 5, we use the structure line, and in all
Right.
other cases, we use the baseline.
that's right. Yep. And that's the, reach 5 is where Beechwood East is. So that kind of makes sense, right?
Yep,
Okay.
that's the
So-
deficit.
So that's the deficit. So that's that total deficit.
I was thinking
Am I-
Beechwood, is Beechwood East not Reach 2? What,
Well, so it depends on if you're going, he changes the labels all the time. So in the monitoring, he goes from
Ah.
1 to 6.
1 in the south and 6 in the
Or
very north.
7,
And the
actually.
renourishment's one to.
gotcha.
But then in the
I actually
permit,
was-
he flips it, and so 1 and 2 in the permit is starting at the north end.
Oh, gosh.
And then 3 is a combination of 2 reaches on the south.
So what is this then? What are we looking at for reach one here? Is that the
Si-
north end or the
Yes,
south end?
and 1 is south.
South.
One
6
is south
the
and
very
this.
north of Wild
That's what I
Dunes.
thought, okay.
This is,
All right,
yeah,
that's what I
this
thought.
is the monitoring report versions. I started changing it to south and north because it's very confusing because Steven's flipping them and then you're like, I don't know
And
what's
he
he
uses
doing.
east and west.
All right, and now let's discuss the erosion rate.
Okay, Okay, so the advanced fill. So on the south, we're using the 89,000, which is a 5-year erosion rate taking us through February of 2025. So it includes a small amount of Army Corps sand, but not the full amount of Army Corps sand. And that made more sense than going back, dropping off all of that and going back to a more stable period. The breach inlet kind of changed, and that's where you saw all the erosion starting in 2022, where the main tidal flow that used to hug Sullivan's Island moved over, and that tidal flow created a second tidal flow that's cranking across Sullivan's Island. So we want to try and use something recent that reflects actually what's going on in breach inlet today.
So that's different from previous calculations that has used either 8 years
He
or
went back,
sometimes
he went back to 2010
So-
2010.
of 30,000 per year.
But it reflects more what's
I
going on right
got
now.
curious on that one, and
Yeah.
again, so this 5-year, the rationale for picking 5 years versus, because I look at Steve's recommendation, he makes adjustments to it, and again, by far, I'm no expert in like how El Nino, La Nina affects currents, tides. You have a North Atlantic oscillation, you have a multi-decadal oscillation. Steve's written papers about this kind of stuff. And so to look at his estimate, all that factors into when you're trying to make a sound engineering-based decision on what affects it. To go back and say, well, let's just use a 5-year number, kind of goes backwards, in my opinion, of doing good engineering practice.
Well,
Dave, I don't think so, because when you go back to 2010, that's 16 years, that's a very long time.
But he makes adjustments to that number based on these other factors, and I don't think he goes, is
And
Steve
when
online?
when you look at the current erosion, it's significantly higher than the last 5 years, right?
But does that
so
mean
why
it's
isn't
gonna
he
be
using that for
predictive?
Wild Dunes, may I ask?
But again, it's a predictive weather analysis, and again, I have very little, I'm no expert in weather analysis, but I do have at least a background understanding enough to know all the factors that go into doing weather prediction is way beyond most people can understand. And to take somebody that studied this kind of stuff for years and years and say, well, we don't necessarily agree with what you recommend, and we want to use a 5-year period.
Well,
I just have a hard
comments, I
time
guess.
with that from an
Can I-
engineering
I'm
side.
with you. I have two
Can I
comments
say,
to
could I say something, please?
Yep.
Stevens estimates, we've been following them for 10 years. And look at where we are now. I'm not sure I understand your point, David, but I'm not so sure I put all of our eggs in Stevens' basket.
So if I look at what he wrote for Wild Dunes, they were using, and this was from the Beach Ad Hoc Committee, I wasn't part of it, but trying to get up to speed, and maybe you can help if you were part of this. But it sounded like they were using the recent erosion in Wild Dunes, and then factoring in that there's going to be 600 to 800,000 cubic yards of shoal attachment coming. I don't know how much they assumed in that. But if you look at like his, his chart, he does, this is what it used to be in Wild Dunes for reaches, the top north two reaches. And then this is the erosion rate more recently. And they were kind of saying, let's try and use this erosion rate more recently, but then assume that there's some shoal attachment coming. He did not apply, and I don't think, that same methodology to the south end. When you look at what CPE, the Terra Martin Coastal Protection, do you know what they're called? The second opinion from Terra Martin, CPE is their firm. She said that the changes at the inlet are going to continue until the situation's addressed. So they recommended a groin because they said it's not going to just change back. It's going to continue to erode at that rate over time. If you look at what Both Olson did, they said kind of the same thing, that the historical probably doesn't apply. So I'm basing it on the 2 second opinions that we've got and a little bit of what he did for Wild Dunes, and I don't know why you wouldn't apply that same process to the south end.
Let me add one more thing. I think we gotta remember we're in a unique position now because we've got sand at a price where we haven't had it before. We've got studies going on about some type of structures to protect us in the future. And historical data has meaning, but we also know that over the last several years, predictions are not always correct. And that even to the extent that they are scientifically based, it's changing. The whole eastern
Right.
seaboard is changing. So I think that this is an opportunity to put our best foot forward, to protect ourselves as well as we can, to create a significant amount of a barrier while at the same time hopefully being able to implement some type of a structure in the near future so that we're not sitting here in 5 or 6 years, again, in the same position. I'd rather be, one of the issues we've had with a lot of things is being proactive instead of reactive. This is our best opportunity to do it now, and we think from our vantage point that this is the way that we should look at it. I'd love to say the historical data, the reality is we've only had a few events like this, and they've gotten worse and worse, and the timeline has sped up significantly. But this is our island, this is our beach, and this is our investment and our way of life, and I think we need to do it right and not shortchange it.
And I kind of sit back, I didn't want to, I tried to hold my
Sure.
thoughts, some of my thoughts again, but I don't want to be any surprises when this comes to council. I will probably be speaking against adopting it. From a goal standpoint, this is a great goal. But when you start adding into the money side of it, and again, when you look and say, well, we have money, well, we actually did not have the 32 million. We're looking at raising taxes. So a question goes, do we still go ahead and raise taxes and do extra work? Or do we take advantage of the fact that we kind of dodged the bullet? And the money side of it is a big, and I don't think this committee is, if you came to me and said, this is how we can afford to do this, completely different story. But I think that's, and again, I
That's our
just kind of
next
shared
meeting.
with you.
That's our
because I
next
am-
meeting.
We
I
will
will- I
work
will
on
bring
that
that up,
too,
but-
Dave. We heard you, but,
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
to react to the council meeting on the 28th.
Yeah, but coming across is, if this being a goal, I think this is a great goal. But to make a recommendation that we implement it without the, how do we fund it question,
I
and
get it.
that's what I'm gonna say.
I get
I-
it. Can we go
yeah.
to the risk analysis
Let me
page?
just add one more thing. If you look at what we've done in the past and what the renourishments
Yeah.
have cost, and you look at how much more expensive it is now, and you think about what's gonna happen in the next 6 or 7 or 8 years when
Right.
it happens again, I don't know how we can afford not to do it.
Well, I'm sharing this with you because this is, you're gonna hear this, so, again, do we get the beach healthy? And I'm not using your term, but where we projected, we're looking, it won't look like it does now. We will have a nice beach, at least for the next,
Right.
even doing the minimum for the next 3 to 4 years. So, again, my question becomes of, do we spend the extra money now to make it even nicer? Or do we look at our alternatives coming up? Because that $4 million to put extra sand on the beach could also be $4 million spent to put groins on the beach.
But I don't think it's just cosmetic. I mean, I would disagree that it's cosmetic.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not cosmetic.
It's not to look like, it's just actually, it'll create a protection for us.
No, I understand
And a
that.
lot of protection.
We'll have more beach, it'll be longer between the next. But again, would that money be better spent doing a hard structure or some other soft structure?
Right. I
And we
understand.
don't have that information yet.
What might
So
be
that's the question
helpful-
that comes up is we don't, if we had the money, no,
Right.
it's not an issue, but do we spend money
Yep.
that we projecting that could be used in other methods?
I would
That's-
be asking the exact same
Yeah,
question.
those are the questions that I'm all be.
Alice
put-
is next. Alice, hold on one second.
Yes, just a question about, you raised the question about taxes. And I don't know about anybody else here, but I'm willing to, I would rather pay some taxes up front and make sure that we have enough money to go forward and continue to keep the beach, get the beach where it needs to be. Now, I'm just one person,
Right, and I am too, so, yeah.
but I don't know if that's been even, I haven't heard that it's been put out there. I mean, maybe, it's been talked about maybe, but I don't know. Where is that stand? that
Raising
option?
taxes, you're
Yeah.
saying?
For the specific thing.
Yeah, that council is considering that right
I
now.
mean, I
It's in
think
their
it's-
budget right now to raise the taxes.
Okay,
And raise other forms of revenue are both in there.
okay.
I guess I would ask from a purely kind of policy question, you all have CSE who has been doing it for 40 years. You now have Foth Olson engaged. They're going to be reporting to you, interfacing with you. And, from my perspective, a huge part of what this group is going to do is work with Chris Creed, Foth Olson, and they're going to be providing exactly, cost benefit analysis. They're going to be, this is the work that those experts are about to provide to you. I am questioning why this group would go at it without any professional expertise at all. And
Well,
kind of
Douglas,
get ahead of it.
that's not really fair. We listened to CSE many, many times. We read all of their reports, so we have all of their input. We listened to Foth Olson already. We had other conversations with Foth Olson than beyond this committee, so we listened to their expertise. And why we're acting now is because City Council meets on the 28th of this month to decide whether or not to move forward with what size of this renourishment project. And we'd like to point out, ahead of that meeting, that a larger rather than a smaller renourishment effort seems appropriate based on our research and our work. That's why.
We're also using
We also
the
have a
volumes
very,
that CSE
we also have a very favorable rate
Same.
for this renourishment project that we can take advantage of.
Well, and I think that's Dan has also made that point. Why doesn't it, I don't think anybody disputes that we got a great rate.
Yeah.
We're probably never, Stephen has said it, you're never gonna get, you probably will never get this rate again. We have erosion, so you can kind of put those two together, I think, and come to the same conclusion of, buy as much sand as you can, when you can, and leave it at that, leave it at that. To me,
Well,
this is.
that's a pretty vague recommendation, right? So that's why we went mathematically and calculated it. What's the deficit? And what's an erosion rate that makes a lot more sense? Because the erosion right now is at the highest point it has ever been. So if you took the erosion rate of the last 2 or 3 years, it would even be higher. So we are not thinking that 12 years is a good, or 16 years is a good example to be used in the future. We are thinking that 5 years is probably as far as you should go in order to predict the future. And that erosion rate, City Council never considered, and that's why we are calculating it for them. And if you use that erosion rate, you need more sand than the 2.5 million.
I am not a coastal engineer by any stretch, but I think if this group locks yourselves into a 5-year rate, you then, when that window, 2022, which was an awful year, drops out of that window, you then have a window of 5 years that has Army Corps sand coming into it, that has massive shoals naturally coming into it. You use that window, I think you're going to end up with a calculation that says, oh, by your definition, it's now largely accretional.
So CSE does not include the renourishment in 2008 or 2018 in their erosion calculations. They go from the end of the renourishment to, the next renourishment, and that's how they
But
calculate.
what are you going to do if
it.
the Army Corps is adding sand every 18 months? Are
Well,
you gonna-
that's why I didn't include it, because I don't.
But I guess my point is, I think you all are, and I would say you're rushing without, to me, I haven't heard a coastal engineer say, yes, we agree with what you're doing. Not that they wouldn't, but I don't know that you've asked that question.
So this is based off of Hilton Head and Chris Creed. So if you look at Hilton Head's monitoring report and you look at their permit application for their renourishment, it is word for word their definition of how they do things, except for I use mean high water line because that's what Stephen uses instead of mean high water. That's literally the only difference.
So, and we've talked to Chris Creed if this is an actual policy, and they've indicated it's not.
Excuse me?
It's not a policy.
It's not a
is it?
firm policy, it's how they go about their renourishment.
But if this was a basis, why wouldn't we talk to Chris Creed about
have.
it as he's engaged with the city, gonna be reporting to the city in the next 30 days?
So I have their monitoring report, I have their permit application. I've talked to Chris about, could they come in and give a professional opinion? And he basically said, I don't think that people want to come in and, do a peer review of another consultant, because that gets a little, no one wants to say that another consultant's doing something wrong. So I
Well,
think that that's
we've engaged them specifically to give us
Not a
cost
peer
benefit
review.
analysis. Yeah,
not a peer
peer-
review of this.
But they are doing cost benefit analysis of all of our options going forward.
Yes. So I talked to Chris, and I said, what do we do? And he said, he said two things to me. He said, first of all, you got to clean up the beach. You can't allow the Army Corps to put non-beach compatible sand on the beach. That's your bigger problem right now than your other problem. I'm like, okay, got it. The second thing he recommended is get as much sand as you can. Just get the sand down, and then we'll come in with the analysis of what do we do. But just get as much sand down as you can. I'm like, okay, got it. So that's all we're trying to do. We use CSC, so we use the definition of a healthy beach from Hilton Head, which we view as a best in class. They all went and saw it, and they were like, okay, that's where we need to go. So we use that exact definition in their permit application, and that's what we're trying to apply here. So it's based off of a coastal engineer that's had proven success. And so we're just saying, let's just try and get to a healthy beach. If we can afford it, let's throw the extra 4 million out there. Because I don't know how fast the regulatory environment works if we need structures. We're not there yet. We'll find that out in about a month probably from the FOF analysis, but we're not there yet. So what should you do? So I'm just following what the coastal engineer said, which is, here's our definition of how we do it. If you apply it, try and get as much sand as you can to protect you.
Thank
So
you.
again, you're going back to get the most amount of sand that you can when the pricing's good. I mean, it does
Based on the
seem like.
definition of a healthy beach that is used in Dare County, North Carolina, and Hilton Head.
I think
Which
that-
again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with. Using the structure line, this went back to all the work that the previous committee did, is they came in as this was a fair. Now, saying let's go 50 feet beyond the structure line and treat the whole entire beach the same, I could buy into that. But I think taking a baseline, favorable baseline as your starting point, just because that's what it was, and trying to, again, protecting a structure and protecting a pool, when you talk about beach, using taxpayers' dollars, yes, protecting a structure, all for it. If it's gonna cost additional money, and again, coming from taxpayers to extend that protection out to a yard and a pool, that becomes a hard sell.
So you would advocate that tourism is not important for this island
I'm
and
not
that
saying
it's
it-
just about the homeowners that are oceanfront?
No, I'm not saying, it's, again, what we're talking about is where the actual beach ends up. Is it 200 feet from the homes, or is it 400 feet from the homes? And it's gonna cost more to maintain it at 400 than closer, so.
I think that's part of.
That's part of the issue that, you gotta face as reality is, yeah, protecting structures, easy sell to people. When it go, well, but it's gonna, for a little bit more money, we can protect yards and pools, and that's, you do call that out in your report. So that's a hard sell.
That's part and parcel of why the last committee recommended and the city elected to, and there were a lot of recommendations
Yeah.
that haven't been addressed or followed or even discussed.
Right.
We can come to that later on, fundraising and all this other kind of stuff, but one thing the city did implement is the prohibition of extended structures on Front Beach.
Right.
So by protecting the structures that are currently in place, that's a whole lot different than protecting future structures to be put into place. And I think that's part of the basis. Plus, from the time of the last committee, the beach has gotten significantly worse than it ever was.
Dave, it may be important to point out that the difference between 2.5 million cubic yards and the 3 million cubic yards that we are looking at is not Beach Road East. right? Beechwood East is maybe a little bit of that, but the majority of that is the south end of the island, where we believe that the deficit is higher than previously assumed, and that the erosion rate is higher than previously assumed.
And I can follow that, and as you were talking again, it was, using the 5 years, you're kind of part of your justification of doing additional sand. I follow that, is let's apply a safety factor kind of engineering wise and say, yeah, we had this, but, apply somewhat of a safety factor and increase that amount.
Yes.
I can understand that point. Again, it was
And it's again a
established.
lower safety factor. If I just took the last 3 years
Yeah.
of the erosion, then it would be even higher.
Yeah, and again, from a standpoint of supporting additional sand in those areas, from setting a policy of this is how we're going to maintain it, do it in the future, that's where I was kind of coming from before, is that sounds like you're second guessing as opposed to let's apply a more conservative approach and take advantage of taking advantage of the cost.
So if we do 800,000 cubic yards on the south end, and the erosion continues, which is what CPE would suggest, at the recent rate, which is based on the change in breach inlet, so that's what CPE would is your most likely scenario. Then that 800,000 cubic yards is going to be gone in about 5.5 years. We're hoping that it would last 8 years. So it would be 5.5 years at that erosion rate. So you're going to have to start sandbagging. You're going to have to start spending money on emergency measures. Or hopefully, you come in with some type of structure that helps you not erode that much. But it puts you sort of back to where we are today with these pictures. And I just worry about the health of the island. We need tourism. The money for all this renourishment for wild dunes,
No, I
the
agree
money
with-
for your drainage project by your house. All of this money is coming in because we're an island that is a place where people want to go to enjoy. And so I feel strongly that we have to protect the economy of this island.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all, and again, but it becomes a prioritization of, do I spend, I have to generate the money to do a drainage project, but if I'm just gonna take the money and put it back on the beach, there's not, where does that benefit the people that,
No,
I
we
think we have to
understand.
do it all.
so that,
We
there's a,
understand,
it's a
Dave,
trade-off,
that
yeah.
in your role as well, city council, you have to look at all of the expenditure requests towards the city, right? So that's not our job. Our job is to put in front of you and in front of Doug, what we believe is a good solution for the beaches. And so we wanted to point out with this calculation that we believe 2.5 million is an absolute minimum, really, that we should do. And ideally, we should do more because more could be very useful right now.
And said like that, it makes a whole lot of sense, but again, getting into like how you got there, it starts raising questions of.
Well, I mean, it's
I'm
very
not
clear
disagreeing
how-
with your statement,
how
I
we-
agree with that 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
how we got there is pretty simple.
Yeah.
We calculated a deficit and we calculated an erosion rate. And both of these are different than what in the past was calculated, right? The deficit is different because we're using the baseline plus the house line,
Yeah.
not just the house line. And the reason for that is we want a beach. We don't want to just protect the houses, we also want a beach. And the erosion rate, the reason that we're using a different erosion rate is we think it's ludicrous to go back 12 years. We think it's much more relevant to look at what happened in the last 3 or 5 years. That's the reason, right? And so putting this on paper and calculating it, I think is helpful for council as you're making your decision on the 28th. I want to give, because I asked him to be on this call, Stephen Trainum, the chance to chime in on all this discussion about erosion rates and what should or should not be used for calculations. Stephen, I hate to put you on the spot right now, but since I asked you to join, I want you to at least comment a little bit on our most recent discussion here. Can you do that, please?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I got a feedback in here, but I'll speak to it. I agree with what David said.
Can you speak up a little bit? We have a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I'm getting a real bad echo on my end too. I would say I agree with what David said on there's a lot of ways you can go about approaching this with looking at the deficits and where these lines are. I disagree that, I don't know that 200 feet up and down the island makes sense in some areas where you're basically shifting what the minimum healthy beach would be in some areas to a condition that it's never even been in before, to a healthier condition, which would be your trigger to implement a project. I think that's a little too aggressive. But at the end of the day, and we submitted a letter to council to recommend some additional yardage, is we can look at all these time periods and erosion rates and windows, and you could come at it from different assumptions, but you want to put as much sand on the beach as you can when you have a price like this. And it buys you more time between projects, it covers some uncertainty, and there's maybe multiple ways you could go about doing that as well. And we're talking with the contractor about whether you place it all now, and if they can maybe provide another level of mobilization, then maybe come back in 3 or 4 years and add a smaller amount down the road, so you're not like up at the east end building 1,000-foot wide berm that people can't walk across. Build it to what it is now and come back in a couple of years and add some more sand if you can get rates like this. So there's a lot of moving parts that could go into it, but I plan to try to get as much sand out there as possible. We completely support. I disagree that, you look at the beach condition. I don't know if y'all are looking at predicted tides or actual water levels, but we've had 4 tides in a row above 7 feet, with the last 3 being about 7.3 feet actually measured. So there was a weather event that created a tide that gets up to a dune. It doesn't matter how healthy your beach is. If you have a weather event like that, the water's going to get up to the toe of the dune, and you're not going to have a dry sand beach. And I don't think that's a good way of measuring the overall health of a beach, is just by going out there on any given day and looking at how much dry sand you have. Over time you can look at that, but I don't think, like up at the Windjammer, it's been a accretional beach over the past couple of years, and overall has never had an erosion issue there at all. So there's things like that that I don't, we haven't put anything to this committee that I would consider any kind of final recommendation. Some of these scenarios we ran through as examples weren't polished, recommendations that included all the nuance that go into it. So I hesitate to put some of those numbers before council on deficits, because they were scenarios and not recommendations from us. But again, at the end of the day, we do want to try to get as much sand out on the beach to extend the life of a project, to maintain the recreational and tourism value. That's what our company's been trying to do for 40 years. I don't agree at all with the idea that just by setting your standard at the structure line, that means that you're letting the water get back to the structures. It's just a measurement reference point. It's not saying that that's what we would allow the beach to get back to.
Can I ask a question, Stephen? Because in the latest
Sure.
report that you just wrote, this was in the packet that was in our last meeting, April 2nd. You had written that there was like a 16,000 cubic yard deficit at the south end, and that's it. And yet when we look at a 6.2 whatever tide over the weekend,
It wasn't a 6.2 tide,
Was
it
it-
was a 7.3 tide.
with wind, 7.3. Okay, so we'll use 7.3. Because I've seen it go up to 8 feet with winds and a really high tide too, right? So under this scenario, you've got homes with water lapping up against sandbags, and you've got a big ridge going all the way up to the pier almost. You've got 5 feet of beach at Fifth, or was it Third or Fifth, where you've got like no dune. So we've got like 12 of those events this year. And we're barely surviving those, but in your recent analysis put forward that I'm sure is going to go to the town council is that we only have 16,000 cubic yards deficit. Like, see, there seems to be a mismatch between the current deficit and the reality. And I know you say you can't just go out and look, but the problem is that we're eroding dunes and people don't have a place to sit. And you want to have enough
Yes.
beach so that on a 8-foot tide, it grows up to the dune, but you don't wipe out a bunch of property.
Right, and there's no properties being wiped out, and we are at the minimum healthy point right now, and in some cases, we are below that at the south end. So it is time to do a project at the south end, and it would have been time to do it a few years ago. So I'm not saying that we don't need a project at all, I'm saying, and being right at the minimum condition, and still for the majority of that area having, you know, you do have some dune, you do have protection. It's not ideal. It's not the, you know, post-project beach that you're looking for, but I'm not talking from the south end to the pier over that area. That's, you know, as you're binning reaches together, you have to understand there's some places that may be under it, there's some places that may be over it, but, you know, so we can look line by line or larger areas. So there are some places that are below it, there are some places that are right at it, there are some places with a little extra sand over that minimum, but it is certainly time to do a project.
Okay. Stephen, I have one more detailed question. Can you comment specifically on the erosion rate? Dave seems to be thinking that when you calculated back to 2010, you did that for some scientific reason. We specifically, concerned with the erosion over the last 3 years, said we need to take the last 5 years as an average under consideration. What is your take on figuring out the right erosion rate?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exercise that we started collecting data there in 2009 when we started our annual surveys for the city. Before that, there was no annual survey data. If you go way back in time and look at historical imagery, up into the 90s and early 2000s, that area has accreted. When we started monitoring it from 2009 until about 2021, you would have years where it would gain sand, years where it would lose sand, and that would vary from reach 1 and reach 2. Sometimes the monitoring reaches, sometimes one would gain, one would lose. You would have storm events. We had Matthew and Irma in 2016 and 17 that were pretty significant events. So you look through the years, some years those areas would gain 30 or 40,000 yards, some years they would lose 50,000 yards. But it was a cycle. And then we had 2 to 3 really bad years where you went from an average loss of somewhere in the 20 to 30,000 yards range to losing 130,000 yards per year. And that type of quick, sudden change is not typically indicative, that's not the right word, but doesn't typically mean that there's been some fundamental long-term like sea level change or sediment supply change. That's more of something happened in that inlet, and we could point to a new channel opening up that was a little closer to Isle of Palms than past channel openings that were a little closer to Sullivan's. That's really the only physical change that you can point to that would allow you to at least try to link some cause and effect. It's very difficult to know precisely what triggered that 2-year period, other than, you know, pointing and kind of, you know, trying to make some not obvious links. Nothing happened in the waterway that was, you know, significant. Nothing happened in weather patterns that were, you know, hugely significant. So that's what we'd have to point to. But then it does make sense to look at, you know, you can look at all the history in the past, and I've argued this with the state on when they're looking at setback lines. You don't use all the available data that you have. You use the best data that predicts what's going to happen in the future. That's what you want to base your policy on. You know, they would go back to the 1800s when they're calculating erosion rates, and, you know, structures like jetties and things have been built since then, so you don't want to consider stuff before that. So looking at a more recent erosion rate makes sense. I think the 5-year rate or 2018 to 2025, before the core project, was about 75,000 yards per year, which included those 2 to 3 really bad years. So I think that's a reasonable number to look at. I don't think it's 100,000 yards per year looking into the future. With what we're seeing coming from the up coast area, we're seeing a lot of accretion in reaches 3 and 4 that we're seeing move through the pier. So I'm optimistic that some of that sand is going to help stabilize the area. So we're trying to consider these long-term, larger scale changes. But I'm not suggesting that, the going back to 2009 and ignoring the recent increase that we've seen is the way to go either. I think, but you just want to kind of consider the benefits and the cost of what you're doing. If you say it's going to lose 150,000 yards per year as being the most conservative, aggressive strategy, yes, that guarantees you a better beach and a longer lasting project, but it's going to cost a lot more. So you're trying to balance the political and financial reality with your predictions there.
So you just mentioned that the 70,000, which is back to 2018, is a decent number. If you take 70,000 times 8 years, that's 560,000 cubic yards. That's the advanced fill rate that you would use, plus you would add some deficit to it. That's higher than what you just wrote in your April document, saying that 400,000 is sufficient on the south end.
Well, we're changing I still believe that 50,000 yards is a reasonable estimate.
You just said 70.
It's clear, correct, because we are putting more weight following this communication with the committee that, we want to be more conservative with that number. So we're putting more weight on these highly erosional 2 years that we had. And that's fine.
I thought you just said the 70,000 was 2018 forward.
It was.
It is.
Okay.
Stephen, question, on the south end, the maximum permit is 800,000. This, I think the recommendation that's being considered by this group is to add an additional, looks like almost 50%. It's like 45%, adding 352,000 cubic yards. And I think driving that is the 200 feet, having 200 feet of dry sand beach seaward of the jurisdictional line.
That's one driver. The other one is the higher erosion rate
We
assumption.
went from
Yeah, and the
70
higher- yeah, and
70
the
to
higher-
89, and then we're not counting the pools and backyards in the definition of healthy beach anymore because the tourists can't access it.
So if we were to do the project as planned, would the project meet this group's new minimum healthy beach at the end of the project? In other words, would there be 200 feet of dry sand after this project is done if it was done as planned?
I looked at the permit drawings, so Stephen can probably answer this better than me, but I looked at the
We
permit.
asked Stephen.
Yeah,
Oh, did you?
Stephen,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Stephen, can you comment on that? Are we going to meet this group's new minimum at the end of putting all the sand that's planned down there? Or are we going to already be below the minimum at the end of the project?
No, we would meet it.
We would meet it?
Yeah, I think so
Yes,
too.
we would not have all the advanced fill that the group is.
So the question would be, how fast would we erode
Yeah.
to a level that's below our request?
So with the pictures, I think his permit was done based on August 2025 data, which is not completely, they haven't been redrawn since the permit went in, but it looked like it was about, it looked like 300 feet in some areas of berm. If you went to the 800,000 cubic yards, the max permit, you would have 300 feet in some areas. And then, Stephen, it seems like by Breach Inlet, it might be under the 200 feet of berm. But the drawings, I wasn't sure where the dune placement was, so I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, that's dune placement is still up for debate on the right at Breach Inlet, and that's where the BCM lines jut, 150 feet seaward of the houses there very quickly. So to put 200 additional feet right there at the corner, basically adjacent to the inlet channel, it's feasible. It's just you're putting it in the most vulnerable spot where it's likely to erode very quickly. So generally, we would taper around that inlet corner.
I'm sorry. Maybe another way to ask it is, if we followed as planned now and we met the minimum beach standard, how long would it be before we did not meet it? Would it be 6 months or a year before we got below that? Because if that is the minimum, and the goal is to keep the minimum healthy beach for a significant amount of time without adding the extra sand, are we gonna be on the other side of that within 6 months or a year?
Excellent question.
Well, while
Is that a
Stephen is
question for
thinking
me?
about the answer, it depends obviously on the erosion rate. If the erosion rate is 75, or if the erosion rate is 125, then you can calculate by this additional sand, it's either 3 years or 6 years until it's gone and we are below the minimum. Right, Stephen?
Yeah, that's
Just doing
right,
the math
but
in
it
my
also
head.
depends on, are you taking areas as a whole, or are you looking at one specific location? If you are looking at one specific location, especially right against the inlet, I cannot guarantee you that, if you put 400 feet of beach out there, that 2 or 3 years later, you're still going to have, 300 feet of beach right adjacent to that inlet. It's just too dynamic of an area without a structure that would hold that sand in place.
So I think, first of all, I committed to city that we are trying to keep this meeting to an hour. We have reached that hour point. I think we have discussed it and reviewed the calculations. I think it's now clear to, everybody around here how we calculated it. I'd like to come to a vote. And maybe the way we should phrase this vote is to recommend to the city to certainly put down the maximum permanent amount of 2.5 million, but ideally put down an additional 500,000 if funds available allow to do it, based on our new definition of a minimum healthy beach.
Or at least is, even if it doesn't meet our, what we would ideally like to have, anywhere above what's the 2.5 million, I think would be, considering the sand situation. If there's some place in between those two areas that, anything would be better than,
We will word it accordingly.
yeah.
Can I get a motion for that, please?
I make a motion to do exactly what you just said.
I'll second the motion.
What is the motion? Just so is it to
Yes.
recommend that
Yes,
volume?
in a-
Are you getting into where it goes and?
No.
Well, I would disagree with that, because right now, the bid permit says that the engineer can put it anywhere they want at the time. And I would say that town council needs to approve those decisions. So for me, it would be, the 3 different reaches is the recommended sand by
Well,
reach.
that's what we mean, yeah.
Well, I don't want to just say in total, because what happened?
South end and north end, or you want to be more, so this is south end, north
I would
end
do it by
volume?
the 3 permitted reaches.
So is that in our,
I would do it by the 3 permitted reaches.
We will send this to you in our revised calculation, putting it into the 3 areas as opposed to the 2. Right
is that in
now,
here? Is that
no,
in the
we
packet?
only
I think I have-
calculated south and
I think I
north.
have north combined and south combined, but I could split that up.
So you all can't, you need this group needs to know those numbers. If it's part of your recommendation, we need to have them. It needs to be in your motion. It needs to be,
Well,
it can't be that you make a motion for something.
Well, then we
Is there
can
any
make
reason
it
we
for
can't
north
combine
end and
north
south
and
end
south
separate.
end?
How about that?
Say what?
We could make it for north end and south end.
North end and
separate.
south end as it is in our
That right
paper,
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say in here, you had it broken down,
Yeah.
south 352
Right.
and north 194.
Yeah.
Does that cover what you're kind of asking?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Can someone make a clean motion?
Get him there.
I'm working on it.
I need clean numbers in the motion, please.
I think that is, it's about page, yep, that's it. What page is that for the PDF? 7? So page 7 of the packet.
So what's the clean recommendation?
194 additional cubic
I
yards
think page 6.
in the Wild Dunes area, the north end, and 355
352.
in the south end.
An additional 352. So
352 in the south end, yeah, for a total of 546. But the way,
Above the permit amount.
above the permit amount.
incremental to the max permit. Max permit.
And rather than locking us in, I think the way I would phrase the motion is maximum permit amount at a minimum, consider to go over and above that to the amount of 546 divided up 194 and 352.
I understood that perfectly. Do we need to rephrase it?
No, I was, did Nicole get it?
I'll do my best.
I'm just saying, so if city council decides they have 2 extra million as opposed to 4 extra million, that would be highly appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah,
right?
no,
So that's what I mean.
no, I follow what you, the recommendation, yes.
Okay. So for that motion, and we can work with you offline to get this,
If you want to send it to me in writing, I don't, can we do that? Can they send a
Yeah,
clarifier?
yeah, I mean, I think they've,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tracking, I got it.
He's tracking.
It's due at least the permitted
part.
max, but include a recommendation of considering up to 546,000 additional cubic yards split, 194 in the north end and 352 in the south end.
exactly.
I would say the permit max by north end
You
and
said it-
south
you said it
end, plus
wonderfully.
this.
Can-
I just don't want,
Can I get,
You have a
Okay.
motion and a second.
I
You have a motion and a
don't
second.
agree with that.
I
so
got a
I'm
motion and a second, so.
I'm not gonna second it.
You're not gonna second, it was already second.
No, because I'm scared that they're gonna take the permit max and they're gonna allow the engineer to make the decision at the last minute. And if Stevens.
It's already spelled out, how many goes into north and south, what else do you want?
I'm fine if this is the way it was written,
That's what we are talking about.
as long
yes.
as it's,
So,
This.
Wendy, are you,
we
so
didn't do
I
permit max by Wild Dunes versus South End. So I would say,
So you can't do any more than that under the permit? You
Right.
can't do, so if you get permit max, that is how it.
That's how it has to
That's
go.
how
so
it has to go.
So then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so then you
Then
second
I am
it
okay.
again.
I do second it, though.
All right, all for it?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. John, we couldn't hear you. You're on mute.
Okay.
Okay,
My dog was making noises. Yes, I agree.
thank you. All in favor? All right, I think that concludes our business for today. So with that,
I have one question.
yes, Wendy.
I would recommend that we present to town council prior to the meeting.
You mean at the meeting or prior to the meeting? At the meeting.
Either way,
Yeah, it
if they're
would
gonna
be
make
at the-
decisions,
At
Is
the
that, is
meeting.
that possible, Dave and
Yeah.
Doug?
it'd have to be at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would like to. Maybe give us 5 or 10 minutes to
Yep.
express our thoughts. Perfect.
What was the date of that?
no, I'm done.
Wendy and I
They-
will prepare for it.
What
Yeah.
was the date of that meeting?
The
28th.
28th, April 28th at 6.
I'll be out of the country.
Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. We're meeting next time on May 7th, I believe. May 7th, 9 a.m.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll work it out.
Right.
And Douglas, I believe, May